Sister Mary was indulging in one of her favourite books after putting Ezerik to bed. Sometime later, she felt something she never thought she would so soon. She felt the mana in the air starting to flow abnormally so, using her mana senses, sending a pulse out of her body and following the abnormality to the source. Her heart sunk in her chest when her senses peered into Ezerik room. She nearly fell off the bed in her haste, rushing out of her room as quick as she could and into his. Sister Mary focused more intensely at Izurik's collapsed body on his bed. She watched a small portion of the surrounding mana funneling into his body from all sides, travelling through his body towards the right side of his chest, before out again. With her fears and assumptions confirmed, Sister Mary gently picked up Izurik, cradling him in her arm, putting on a brave, worried face, all the while blaming herself for the situation at hand. This is all my fault. I didn't think you understood. I didn't think you would try such a thing. I should have paid more attention. Please be careful, my sweet eyes. The more she spoke, the harder it was to stop the tears from pouring down. Her eyes was glued onto his body, sitting down on a nearby chair. For the rest of the night, she barely blinked while watching over Izurik, intensely staring at him with her mana sight to watch the progress of him creating his own mana heart. Sister Mary knew the process was dangerous, one she couldn't simply interrupt. Interruption or failure to create a mana heart can easily lead to dire consequences. She decided to wait for the very last moment before stopping him, a decision that weighed heavy on her heart and mind, but a decision she knew was the best. When morning time came, she had to convince herself to eat, that neglecting herself wouldn't help anyone. That morning was the first time Sister Mary didn't sing to herself when making breakfast, and the quietness did her no favours. While eating, she decided to revert back to breastfeeding for Izurik. She believed and hoped it would be a more natural feeling and instinct that wouldn't distract from his concentration. After breakfast was done, she gently covered Izurik to block him from the sun, using her ability to turn their wooden chair into a nice big wooden basket, adding some nice cushions, a handle, and a little shade curtain to block the sun. She knew he never really liked the sun much. With a broken smile, she spoke as softly and sweetly as she could with a slight cracked voice. "There you go, little guy. Don't you worry, I won't be going anywhere." She carried him out to the morning air. She took the deep breath in while trying to remain positive, going about the daily routine of gardening that took far longer than usual. Sister Mary couldn't help but to stop numerous of times to watch Izurik's progress closely. Eventually, when the work was done, she returned inside to clean themselves off. Afterwards, carrying Izurik to the storage, collecting what they need before heading to the church's kitchen. When people noticed behind the counter that Sister Mary finally arrived, the chattering grew. One of the men approaching the counter just to check in on her, his voice was filled with concern and worry. "Hey, running a lot later than normal. The man couldn't finish what he wanted to say before he noticed Izurik. The man's voice dropped heartbrokenly, so, "Oh, how? Oh dear child." Others slowly begin to realize the situation, their chatter turning into murmuring as words spread amongst each other before turning completely silent. "Don't worry, Ralph. Everything's fine. Sorry for running late." Sister Mary reassured while doing her best to hold back tears and snot. She didn't anticipate others' emotions to make it so much harder to be strong. With one hand she tried to prepare the food. Without hesitation, Ralph walked around the counter and immediately stopped her from preparing their food with a gentle hand. His voice was more soothing, gently resting his hands on her shoulders, trying to offer comfort and support. "Hey, don't you worry about this. We can handle it for you. Just head home. That's far more important. I promise you we won't burn down the kitchen." Ralph let out a small chuckle, an attempt to help lighten the atmosphere. Others gathered around the counter, offering their own comforting words, all the while agreeing with Ralph's declaration. Sister Mary wanted to protest, but Ralph was already guiding her to the back of the church. "We will even take care of the buyers too. Just come back after closing, and we'll give you a report of everything that happened." Sister Mary could only nod her head, feeling it becoming harder and harder to maintain her composure. She reluctantly put her trust in those who she cared for so often. entering back into her farmhouse and closing the door behind her. Ralph and the others began talking amongst each other about the situation. From the homeless to the less fortunate and those struggling with their own businesses, they all knew the seriousness of the situation. Before they did anything else, they all got on their knees and prayed for good fortune for Sister Mary and Izuric. They all agreed to not share this information to anyone outside of who's gathered here. They knew even harmless information could be disasterful in the wrong hands. Those who knew how to cook all stepped forward to help prepare food for all, and cleaning up far better than it was before after eating. When the buyers came, most of the people stayed mainly as witnesses, although a few was willing to step up if they decided to take advantage of Sister Mary's absence. Ralph and a few others helped run the shop, marking down everything that was sold. There was a few questions of Sister Mary's absent, but they all just shrugged and said Sister Mary needed a little vacation with the kid to enjoy mother and childhood. It was convincing enough to not resort in any other questioning. When the store shut down, Sister Mary returned for a moment just to receive the update and collecting the money with little words exchanged. They all gave their last condolences before going their separate ways once more. After returning, Sister Mary went back to her room, laying down on her back with Izuric resting on her chest. She knew it would be another sleepless night, and so it was. On the second day, that was more of the same. She made breakfast, fed Izuric, although she didn't tend to the garden. Sister Mary did drop off some prepared food early in the church's kitchen. Even for the brief moment outside, she didn't even hear birds singing this early, a small feeling she didn't like. Sister Mary left a note for Ralph and the others to help themselves once again. Afterwards, she returned to her living room, cradling Izuric in her arms. She thought she was doing well so far. That was before Izuric's temperature started to rise, the whimpering in pain accompanied by the twitching and squirming. Her composure finally broke as tears were pouring out like rivers from her sore, tired eyes. Sister Mary kept a good look on Izuric. She knew what he was doing was far reckless, but she saw steady progress. She felt she probably wouldn't have to step in and everything would be okay. And yet none of that mattered when listening to the pains of her child, when knowing the same pain. Sister Mary reminisced on when she had her own mana channels ripped, stretched, crushed and more. The pain that was labelled a war crime for being inhumane torture. Many people felt such pain before. Rather it was from failed training exercises, ego, or just a desperate situation when you use everything you got to the limit. The idea her child is suffering such a thing broke her heart. A day she thought she could handle was being tested by the worst agony she ever felt. The sun wasn't even over the horizon, and now she must listen and bear witness to his suffering. Given the progression, she knew it was going to be a long day. Sister Mary didn't do anything beyond the necessary. As his fever went up, she did the best she could to make it more comfortable, only keeping him in his underwear to help cool him down, just patiently waiting. Many times she debated bringing out the TV or a radio or anything for other noise. Izuric's whimpering and squirming gradually went up and down throughout the day. Eventually, Sister Mary did bring in the TV, but she didn't turn it on. She noticed the sun went down and decided to go outside, taking a deep breath when greeting the night's fresh air, sitting on her porch under the moonlight. Rocking in her chair, she looked upon the moon in silence. The longer her eyes lingered, the more she understood some of the fascination. Even without realizing, Sister Mary began softly singing once more while rocking back and forth, a soft voice echoing through the silent air. A gentle smile appeared on her face, caressing Izuric with a wet towel to help keep him cool. She could see how much energy he burned by the loss of a lot of weight. Such a fragile look, she thought. Before she realized, there was a crow that landed on the railing of the porch. Once Sister Mary noticed, she was filled a little with curiosity. It wasn't unheard of for her singing to attract animals, but given the circumstance, it could easily be another. "Hello there, little critter. Did you come to hear a song, or perhaps you've come looking for a master?" As if waiting for an answer, Sister Mary continued her singing, watching the little bird hop onto her lap. She gently petted the little bird's head while realizing the crow was looking at Iziurik, silently answering her question. The crow was analyzing Iziurik carefully. The fascination slowly hushed Sister Mary's singing, leading the crow to look up at her. She couldn't help but let out a little giggle. For a moment, everything felt back to normal. A more genuine smile rested on her face. After checking the time, she realized it was getting a bit late. Gently shooing the bird as she stood up, the bird hopped back on the railing, while Sister Mary returned inside, opening the side window for the crow, who decided not to enter. After shutting down the house, Sister Mary made her way to her room, tucking themselves in with Iziurik laying on top. She checked his progress one more time. She knew it would be just one more night or so, which means another night without rest for her. Throughout the night, while gently stroking Iziurik and wiping the sweat off, his temperature was still high, but it looked like the pain was subsiding. Then Sister Mary noticed the same crow resting on the windowsill. As if inspired by another set of eyes, she softly smiled and decided maybe she could just close hers and give them a break for once. Although Sister Mary didn't sleep, when morning came, her eyes felt refreshed. Glancing over, noticing the crow was gone, she got up and started the daily routine once more. The third day was similar to the second, breakfast and delivering the fresh food to the kitchen. Deciding she needed to move around a bit more, she spent a good portion of the day out in the garden holding Iziurik, harvesting some food at a very slow pace. It was more about enjoying the fresh air and keeping busy than anything else. While working, Sister Mary recognized a familiar feathery critter. After a simple greeting, she continued her gardening. The few times when she needed to put Iziurik down, she noticed the crow would sit on the edge of the basket watching him. The little bird even stole a few small pieces of the harvest and delivered them to Iziurik with intentions to feed. She thought the little critter could probably sense the state of Iziurik and let it be. Eventually, she returned back inside to get themselves freshened up, trying to relax for the rest of the day, only doing the bare minimum for herself. Eventually, she decided to head back to Iziurik's room, sitting down on a chair right next to the bed and window, watching the sun go down and the moon come out to illuminate the room. She used magic to drain another towel before placing another wet one on his head. Sister Mary looked down after feeling Iziurik squirm a little. Her eyes began to fill with tears of joy. Watching his eyes finally open, shined bright emerald under moonlight. She had a guess what probably happened, seeing Iziurik's eyes quickly moving back and forth before focusing up at her. She couldn't stop the tears, happy it was finally over. Sister Mary watched as Iziurik reached up, caressing away a tear from her cheek before grabbing a handful of her hair as a last attempt to hold on with his weak, fragile hand before passing out as fast as a blink. A wave of relief flew over Sister Mary, seeing it was finally over. She took a good look at his manor heart while laying him down onto his bed, wiping away the last of the sweat, knowing he'll be okay and back to normal in the morning. She couldn't help chuckling with hysteria. "You are so grounded." Wiping her own face clean, she noticed in the windowsill the bird watching over Iziurik. Sister Mary tucked him in and left the room for a moment, returning with pieces of food, a pillow, and a blanket. She set the food out across the open window right next to the crow. "Make sure you get some rest. He'll be happy to see you in the morning." Spoken sweetly before saying her good nights to both of them. Giving Iziurik a kiss on the head, she could finally feel